Hell in a Cell. Kane was involved in this whole thing. What a shocker, right? Kane gets involved like he has nothing else better to do. Jesus Christ. So then at the end, at the very, very end, I think I heard a curb stop happen in the matchup, and then 1, 2, and then all of a sudden Dean Ambrose kicks out of the curb stop. And I was like, God damn, this is getting real, real serious. And then something mysterious takes place. The room gets dark. A light was in the middle of the ring, and who appears before everybody? None other than Bray Wyatt. He comes out and does his thing, does what he could, interferes in the Dean Ambrose-Seth Rollins match, beats up Dean Ambrose. Seth Rollins pins Dean Ambrose. 1, 2, 3. Seth Rollins wins over Dean Ambrose thanks to the courtesy of Bray Wyatt. Now, I could understand the people's complaints when it comes to the fact that they are just are livid and upset that Dean Ambrose lost to Seth Rollins. Now, personally, I agree with that. But despite the fact that Dean Ambrose lost, it was still a great Hell in a Cell match. That's what everybody needs to understand. Now, here's my opinion on the whole thing. First of all, I loved it. It was great. It was awesome. But I think, in my opinion, and I think you guys will agree upon this also, the fact that if I had this my way, the match between Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins and everything else like that, let it go. I mean, hey, if you got to get Kane involved, let him. I mean, he gets involved every time. He gets his ass kicked in the end, and then that's it. I would have rather have let Dean Ambrose win the match than Seth Rollins. You know why? Just to end the feud and just to see Dean Ambrose beat Seth Rollins. That's it. I mean, that's what the people are complaining about. They would rather see Dean Ambrose win than Seth Rollins. They're trying to push this whole thing with Seth Rollins to a point where it's like, you know, you can make a superstar lose every single time, but let him win just one time. Just one time. That's it. All right? If you make him lose every single time, you're basically pulling a Daniel Bryan. That's what you're doing, okay? But nonetheless, to me, I would have let Dean Ambrose win. Victory, you know, he would be on top. Everything would have been fine. And then Bray Wyatt would have shown up. And then Bray Wyatt would have came out and attacked Dean Ambrose for no apparent reason, like he has done every single time with John Cena, with Chris Jericho, with Daniel Bryan, and the list goes on and on. That would make a whole lot of sense. The fans would not bitch about it. And more importantly, they would all get a great match. That is my opinion. That's how it goes. And that's how you guys feel. Because here's the thing. Like I've said many, many times on my Main Event Talk, I'm not going to give you statistics. I'm not going to give you a graphic, a chart of anything. I'm just going to go by how I feel and how the fans feel. And the fans feel that regardless if the match was tremendous, it was great, it was awesome, I think the match should have been Dean Ambrose winning against Seth Rollins to end the feud, and then you would get Bray Wyatt involved. It would make a whole lot of sense. The fans would not bitch so much, and Twitter and Facebook would blow up in your faces like you wouldn't fucking believe. That's how it works, okay? That's a perspective of the wrestling fans' point of view. My point of view. Anyone else's point of view means absolutely nothing, okay? Zero, nada. Even if you think you're a wrestling fan. And speaking of that, I want to get into that little part that I just mentioned right there in just a moment. But nonetheless, of course, tonight, WWE Raw is taking place tonight. What is the outcome of Hell in a Cell tonight? What are we going to see? What is the future holding for Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose? And where does Bray Wyatt fit to this entire thing? What about the whole thing with John Cena and Randy Orton? Have we seen this for the last time? My guess is probably not, you know. All I know is I can't wait to watch the game. I can't wait to watch Raw. And the main event is just psyched and ready to go. Cannot wait for all this, for all this to happen. Now that I got that part out of the way for Raw and Hell in a Cell and the game, now it's time to get into my little rant. And this rant is courtesy of every single person that is watching this episode of the Main Event Talk. Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to look upon the screen of the main event right here. You're looking at it, you're seeing me, everything's fine. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to answer this particular question. You can raise your hand, you can throw your fist in the air, you can throw a finger, you can do whatever the fuck you want. I just want to know one question, and if you raise your hand, you know what's up. All of you that are subscribers to the Main Event Talk, all of you that have seen this episode of the Main Event Talk or have seen every other episode, tell me this one question. How many of you are wrestling fans? And I mean wrestling fans in general. WWE, TNA, Ring of Honor, WCW, ECW, any wrestling organization out there. How many of you are wrestling fans? Oh yeah. If you're raising your hand, you are truly a wrestling fan. If you're raising your hand because you're a WWE fan, okay. If you're raising your hand because you're a TNA wrestling fan, okay. If you're raising your hand because you are a fan of that organization, I'm going to make something clear about this. You are a wrestling fan, but you're not that true of a wrestling fan. Now I'm not trying to knock all of you, but I want to get something out in the open right now, because to all of you that have raised your hand, that have said that you're a wrestling fan, I dig you and I understand you. Now, how many of you, and I want you to raise this hand, and I want you to hear this, because I know most of you probably get sick and tired of hearing this. How many of you guys have heard from other people that have said the same thing over and over again? Hey man, you realize wrestling's fake? Hey man, you know that shit's fake, right? Hey man, you know those guys are not really doing what they're supposed to do, right? How many of you people have heard that? Yeah, I've heard it like 2 million times and stuff like that there. You know, let me give you a little inside scoop. Let me give you an inside scoop of me, okay? To give you the reality of my world when it comes to professional wrestling. A long time ago, when I was a kid, I was into this thing called Hulkamania. And Hulkamania was the hottest thing going in all of the 80s. In professional wrestling, there was something known as the WWE, or WWF to be exact. And Hulkamania was the hottest thing going in that era. And during that time in the 80s, there was also another faction. Long before there was Evolution or DX or the NWO, there was the most powerful faction in the history of professional wrestling, which had 4 of the greatest talents to ever step foot in the ring and one of the greatest managers in the history of professional wrestling. We're talking about Tully Blanchard, Ole Anderson, Arn Anderson, Ric Flair, J.J. Dillon. They all consist of the 4 horsemen. You see, in my era, wrestling was awesome. That was the wrestling that I digged. And at that time, Hulkamania was the shit, the horsemen. You had the British Bulldogs, the Killer Bees. You had the Total Package Lex Luger. You had Brian Pillman. You had the Hart Foundation. You had the Road Warriors. You had a lot of this great talent that people digged in the 80s. And at that time, as a kid, wrestling to us was real. Yeah. We didn't give a shit if it was fake or anything else like that, because we didn't even know what it is. As a kid, we loved professional wrestling. We loved to watch TBS every Saturday night. Sometimes even on Friday nights. We sometimes like to watch primetime wrestling when we had the opportunity. But a long time ago, somewhere around 1990 to 1991, some guy decided to go ahead, be a jerk, and tell me that wrestling was fake. Yeah, he told me that wrestling was fake. As a kid, I didn't want to believe it. Then I started hearing the stories. Then I started believing it. And then what happened? I gave up wrestling for over a year. Yeah, I gave up wrestling for over a year. But then, during that time, after I gave up wrestling, I started getting back into it again. Because I started understanding why people love professional wrestling. I didn't understand what the whole, fake and reality thing was up until 1991. And ever since then, I still continue to watch professional wrestling, whether it was WWF or WCW, NWA, or anything in that particular nature. But people still like to go ahead and come at you and say that wrestling's fake and everything else like that. Now, here's the crazy thing. These are the same people that will tell you that wrestling's fake, but yet they start to go ahead and get into wrestling because of this other era that came out that you and I and everyone else have been a part of. You know what that era was? It was somewhere between 1996 and 2000, 2001. It was known as the Attitude Era. You know, because in the times, WCW had this little creation known as the NWO. And Hulk Hogan, who used to be the biggest hero in the 80s, became the biggest heel of the 90s. And he told every single wrestling fan to stick it. And then in the WWE, they started changing themselves. Because they went from a hero like Bret the Hitman Hart, who they booed and they wanted to stick the finger to a guy who stuck the finger to everybody else and said, go fuck themselves, but yet they loved him in the form of the toughest SOB in the WWE at that time, Stone Cold Steve Austin. And during that time in the wrestling business, I understood now the reality and the fakeness. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Let me correct that in my own little term. The reality and the fantasy of professional wrestling. In other words, in the 80s, as a kid, I understood the whole bad guy, good guy thing. And then when the Attitude Era came along, I understood that there were no good guys and there were no bad guys. But there were some talented athletes and there were some really great superstars who made a difference in the wrestling industry. It made me love wrestling even more because sometimes they will even go as far as make it so real that they will not even use a script or use a line or anything. They just go ahead and go whatever comes along, because at that time in the 90s, wrestling became real. That's what it was. And what is this message all about? What am I talking about? What am I explaining to all of you? Let me tell you exactly what I'm talking about. To all the morons and to all the idiots, and you know who those guys are. Those are the ones that keep telling you the same thing over again. Here you are wearing your Randy Orton t-shirt. And people are starting to tell you, hey man, you know Randy Orton ain't real, right? You know all the shit he does is fake, right? Here's what I tell a lot of these people. Can you please tell me something I don't fucking know? Please. Like, you got anything better to do than to tell me that wrestling's fake? I don't give a flying fuck if wrestling's fake. Hey, I grew up watching wrestling for a long, long time, okay? And I'll tell you this right now, wrestling ain't as fake as you think. Yeah, you let me slap a figure 4 leg lock and tell me it doesn't fucking hurt. Yeah, I've done that to a lot of people before. I've actually, a long time ago, actually powerbombed somebody through a fucking grass, right? I actually lift up somebody, dropped him on his fucking head, and slapped the figure 4 leg lock and watched him cry like a little fucking bitch. And then before you know it, he starts watching WWE. He starts watching WCW. All the people that used to tell you that wrestling's fake, it ain't shit, it don't mean crap, they start watching it all of a sudden. And now here we are in 2014. I'm still a wrestling fan to this day. And every person continues to do the same thing. Whether they say it to your face, or whether they say it on Facebook, or whether they say it on Twitter, they say it on Instagram, they say it whatever the fuck they want. Hell, they even put a platform for everyone on YouTube to look for, to tell every single person wrestling's fake. It don't mean shit. It's nothing. It's not as good as it used to be. Now, I do agree with that part, the fact that wrestling was not as good as it used to be back in the 80s and back in the 90s. It was the fucking shit. But regardless of what they think, regardless of what the morons, the jackoffs, and the idiots that tell us the same fucking thing over and over again, that wrestling's fake, here's my message to all you morons. Can you please tell us something that we haven't heard already? Please, I'm begging you to come up with something original. I'm begging you to come up with something that we have not heard. Because here's the thing, you, and I'm not talking about the wrestling fans, I'm talking you, the morons, the idiots, and the jackoffs that tell us the same thing over and over again. Now, all of us as wrestling fans, we dig WWE, we dig TNA, we dig Ring of Honor, we dig everything because it's entertaining to watch. And more importantly, here's the thing that all of you morons don't understand, that all of us true wrestling fans know. wrestling is fake.